Hello, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Mid-American Gardener. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain, and joining me on the show today is a panelist you will definitely recognize. She's a regular here. Jen Nelson is joining us today. And Jen, before you get into your show and tells, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where we can find you in the garden.
Sure. I'm Jen Nelson. I'm a horticulturalist. You can find me online at groundedandgrowing.com, and you can also find me on the U of I campus these days. I've been teaching Hort 105 vegetable gardening, so that's where I am right now, complete with retro chalkboards and everything.
Love the retro chalkboard. You don't see those a whole lot anymore, so I was definitely excited the first time we visited your classroom. So, all right, so you've got some show and tells today. Which one do you want to do first? It's up to you.
Well, I will show the cute little houseplant that I couldn't resist.
Oh, we all love when Jen goes plant shopping.
Yes.
Well, accidentally plant shopping.
This guy fell in my cart. I know this will probably air after Valentine's Day, but nonetheless, even if it wasn't Valentine's Day, I would still buy this little guy. This is called a Sweetheart Hoya, Hoya carrii, and it's apparently how I don't know very much about this. This is just totally the cuteness sucked me right in, so I have to learn how to grow this plant. Apparently, you just root the individual leaves. And the pictures I've seen online with it actually growing, there's some stem section, and then the leaves just look like hearts. And so there's where the name comes from. And it should flower at some point, as most Hoyas do. They're also called wax plants, so the flowers look like they're carved out of wax. They're really beautiful, and they last a fair amount of time.
So this guy, you said the leaves will kind of grow off of one another, like piggybacking and make an arch? Is that what I'm kind of visualizing?
That's what I've seen. There might be like a small amount of stem, and then the leaves kind of come off, like the point of the heart coming off of the stem. Yeah, this will be. We might have to do an update on this guy, see what actually happens with them. So
like I said, we all love when Jen goes out plant shopping, because at least one thing is going to jump in the cart. At least one.
It always does. It always does. Like, I had no intention of buying this guy on the Saturday morning that I found him, but.
Here we are.
Here we are.
So the second update you've got for us today, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we visited Jen in the classroom, and it's oyster mushrooms, correct? Your class is doing oyster mushrooms?
Yes,
so
just
walk us through again the process for folks who maybe didn't see that show, and before we get into the update.
So we're growing oyster mushrooms. We're using a kit that I purchased from a company in Wisconsin. And a lot of times those kits come already, you might have to add the spawn, as they call it, to a log or some sort of wood product, maybe sawdust, or like sometimes they do like a bag of sawdust or straw, some sort of a plant woody sort of product. And straw is not necessarily woody, but it's cellulose like wood would be. And so one of the kits used toilet paper, which sounds so disgusting until you think about the fact that toilet paper is just wood in a different form. So what we did was the spawn comes seeded on wheat. And so it came in like a big brick, and we had to put boiling water on rolls of toilet paper. And then we put the grain that was seeded with the mushroom mycelia in the center, like in the hole of the...
Like the cardboard tube?
Yeah, okay. And some of them we removed the cardboard tube, that we were trying to like optimize it for the students, because the students are going to actually do this next week. But this is kind of our example one, and it's working. It looks really hideous, and...
Before you open the bag, it was like very steamy in there. And
so we've had it in a room where we set the thermostat to 72. And so they're just kind of hanging out. We tested whether they liked the light or the dark better. It seems like having them in the dark promotes their growth a little bit better. You were asking if this smells bad, and it just smells like mushrooms. It smells like if you opened up fresh mushrooms from the grocery store. It's not a bad smell at all. This doesn't look like anything you would eat, of course, right now, because we have to go through a process of probably later this week moving our samples into the cold room, and we have a walk-in cooler. They need to be in there for a couple of days according to the instructions, and then you take it out and you kind of open the bag like I did today, and that cold in combination with the fresh air will trigger the fungus to start forming the fruiting bodies, which is the stuff we eat that will look like the oyster mushroom coming out. They kind of grow flat. They look like oyster shells.
So remind me again from start to finish, when will the students be able to harvest and enjoy?
It ends up being between 4 and 6 weeks, depending how long you keep it in this stage that we have it now. We'll probably keep it in this stage about 3 weeks. So we'll probably be seeing harvestable mushrooms between 4 and 5 weeks after we start.
Wow. Okay. We'll have to check in with you again to see how things are going in a couple weeks. I just find that so fascinating. Is
Well,
it? Go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead. Yeah, I'm just excited as I've not done this on this kind of scale before, and I'm glad the students are really excited about it too.
And you get to be excited too, lifelong learner.
Yep, that's right.
So we also posted on Facebook for some of our viewers there to ask or answer questions, ask questions. You answer the questions. Someone's wanting to know how you can or if you can divide an established lavender plant. Is that possible? I know lavender is so fickle, at least for me anyway. So is it possible to divide it? And if so, how do you go about it?
It's possible to divide it. You would have to look and see if you have a central stem coming out of the ground or more than one. But before I would attempt to divide it, because like you said, it can be really finicky, I would be more apt to do a cutting. And so in the spring, once it starts growing again, you can take a cutting from some of the new growth, and you would just let it grow to about 4 or 5 inches or so, and then make a cutting, cut it off, and you can get rooting hormone at most garden centers. You can do it without, but it will work better with rooting hormone. It's a white powder that has the correct plant hormones to induce the cutting to actually form its own roots. You would need to strip off the leaves on maybe the bottom couple of inches and put it in a pot of moist potting media, and I would put it in a Ziploc baggie and put it not in direct sun, but like a well-lit area. And I wouldn't do just one. I would do a bunch of them because cuttings don't always work on the first try, especially if you're new at it.
Okay. Now, would that be the same if it was an outdoor or indoor? Would the process be the same for outdoor
Yeah,
lavender?
the process would be the same for outdoor. But the thing with outdoor, I would wait until things start to grow this spring. This would not be taking a dormant stem from outside right now and trying to root it's not going to work very well. But definitely wait into the spring months once it gets growing some.
Excellent. Okay, Jen, always a pleasure hanging out. Thank you so much. And now we've got two things to check back in with you on, the Hoya and the
Okay,
mushroom saga. So thanks
sounds
again,
great.
and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
If you've got garden questions, we've got garden answers. Send your questions and don't forget a photo to yourgarden@gmail.com, or you can look for us on Facebook. Just search Mid-American Gardener and you might see your question on an upcoming show. Thanks so much, Jen. And now we're going to go to another one of our panelists who is joining us via Skype. John Bodensteiner is going to talk to us more about, well, you're just going to get us all excited for spring, basically, is the gist of this segment. So first, introduce yourself, John, and tell us a little bit about where we can find you.
Okay, I'm John Bodensteiner. I'm a Vermilion County Master Gardener, and I I volunteer at Schlarman High School. In fact, I talk about this very thing. I had the kids today pick out a couple of packets of seeds that they each want. So we're getting ready starting March 1 on some of the longer germinating seeds to get going. So I garden up in near Bismarck. So enjoy gardening of all types.
All right. And so, like I kind of alluded to, we're going to continue to talk about spring and getting things ready. So last time we had you on, we talked about ordering seeds and sort of planning where they were going to go. And we're just going to continue that conversation and talk a little bit more about containers and seed packets. So get us ready for planting, John.
Yeah, hopefully everybody has their seeds that they ordered from the catalogs. I know I've got mine, and I've heard from a couple of people that ordered after they heard me say that, and they were out of a lot of seeds. So Uh, it's one of those things that the local stores have lots of seeds yet. So if you haven't got your seed yet, get out there. A lot more people are gardening, and we were talking about saving seeds too, and I do have some seeds saved from other years. I have my little seed saving kit here. If I can show it without
Oh, very
tipping it all
nice.
over. But I take that out and I process the seeds. The main thing is to have a good container that's dark, that you can close that. And I've got a couple of silicone type dehydrators here to keep them dry, and and then in a cool, dark place. So,
We did
uh,
have a question, John, while you're talking about the seeds. Terry Husted wrote in an email and said, I really enjoyed the show with the gentleman from Vermilion County who discussed ordering seeds. I was wondering if he saves heirloom seeds, and if so, any hints to avoid cross pollination. He talked about having an unplanned crossing of a black zucchini and a yellow squash, which turned out great but wasn't the end goal. So, do you save heirlooms, and how do you keep them from cross pollinating?
most of your heirlooms are self-pollinating. They are not going to cross a lot. There is some that do, but most of them don't. If you are wanting a certain variety not to cross pollinate at all, you need at least, I'd say, 20 feet to 25 feet between the two varieties, and you want them in an area where you're going to have some bees and things like that that are going to cross pollinate. So the farther apart that you can have them, you may want to have put one in the front yard, one in the backyard. While you're doing that, you're still going to have some cross pollination, but that year that you're going to be getting the fruit, you're going to get that fruit that year. The following year is when you may run into a little bit of a problem if they have been cross pollinated. I know that we are having bees. Bees will go up to a mile and a half as far as pollinating. So unless you have a way of, and you can do this as soon as you see your male flowers and your female flowers, or if they're a, a complete flower, you can take a paintbrush and just paint those and pollinate them, and then cover them with a um, like a plastic bag for just until the flower falls off, and then they won't be pollinated. Then you've got your true seed, and it's a lot of work sometimes. Uh, Unless you've got a very large yard, you're probably going to not be able to do that. So
Okay.
um,
All right.
it's a lot of work. So getting back to, planning is everything. You don't want to be buying seeds that you're not going to use, and the container that's one of that you're going to plant your seeds in is very important. You want to make sure that they are clean, sterilized, to the point of I've got a 55-gallon drum at the greenhouse and at home that I keep a 10% Clorox solution right when I'm about to plant my seed. And I dip every container in that just for, just a few seconds is all it takes. And uh, just to make sure that they are sterilized. You don't want to have a disease. That is if you are reusing them. Now, if you've bought new, you don't have to do that. And um, containers are fairly expensive, so I like to reuse mine. So I do sterilize them, making sure that there's not going to be a disease in there, or an egg or an insect, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So getting
Okay.
to the types of containers, there's all kinds. I have this little one that I use for showing at grade school. This is just a ice cream bucket, and there's um, toilet
Mm-hmm.
bowl and then you fill these with soil and put them in here, and make sure the main thing. And I was going to do this last time we talked. Labeling is so important, because if you put, this has about 12 different tubes in it. If you put different tomatoes in each tube, if you haven't labeled those as you plant them, you are never going, well, I should say never. You are not going to be able to tell which tomato is which until you actually see the fruits. So labeling is so important.
And
So
John, I
this
love
is a
that you're
free.
using things that are just around the house. I've always appreciated that about gardeners. We're very resourceful people. Milk jugs and buckets and
Milk jug.
none of that stuff goes in the trash.
Finished the milk jug today. I'm doing some winter sowing, and that is where you take seeds that are fairly hardy. You don't want to take a tomato or a pepper, but what you do is I've got some things already planted in my milk jugs just outside of the greenhouse. What you do is you plant them in good. You punch some holes in it, fill it with about halfway with soil, take the lid off, and then plant your seeds, cover them the way the seed packets say, and then put them outside. You tape the milk jug together, and they will sprout when appropriate. So if you go online, there's all kinds of information on. They call it winter sowing. Um, this is another one. These are kind of nice, and these are like paper. They're recycled paper. So, and these you don't have to take the plant out. You can just as your plant, you transplant your seedlings into these, and once you're ready to put them in the garden, all you have to do is tear them apart
hmm And I really
and
like
then put
those.
this.
Those come in handy, John, for people who are a little heavy-handed, a little rough, myself. If I'm
Yeah,
transplanting lettuces or spinach or things that are pretty delicate, I love those because it takes the damage out of it for me and worrying
right.
about the roots.
The one thing with these, if you use these, make sure that this top layer here is underground. Otherwise, the air going by this is going to wick all the moisture away from the soil, and you're going to end up with a very dry plant. So until the root can get through this, so make sure that if you use these recycled pots, the paper pots, or even those toilet, that is completely underground.
Good
Okay.
advice. Good to
Now
know.
you can you can individually plant uh, seeds, or you can, like I take the kids at school today. I gave them containers um, like this. I'm recycling again. These are little fruit greens, and
Oh
you take
yeah,
them
from
and
the produce section. There you go.
fill them with soil, and each student is going to get one of those, and you put a whole packet. And it's very important that when you use that you use seed starting mix. Don't go out and buy potting soil. Don't go out to your garden and get that. You're going to end up with diseases. And the biggest one with garden soil that you get off is a fungus that will actually cause damping off. So and you want to make sure that if you do use these things, these little things, you put holes in the bottom so that they have good draining.
And John, I wanted
Most
to
of the
ask
time
you
they're
about the
aerated.
seed starting mix. When you're using that, do you wet yours first? What is your
Yes,
process? Because
that is
a lot of people have talked about how it'll swell, especially if it's got that core in it. So talk
well,
a little bit
and
about that.
yeah, I always pre-moisten mine. I take a mister and moisten it. I prepare it about a week before, and I keep it in an airtight container so that it doesn't evaporate. It is if it dries out completely, it is hydrophobic. If you water it, all the water is just going to run off. And a lot of times, if you have a sprinkler or something, you're going to wash the top layer of soil off, or of seed starting mix, and probably most of the seeds. So it's very important that you pre-moisten it. And then what I like to do is just take a spray bottle after I plant the seeds. And that's another thing. They have found that vermiculite actually works better than using once you've got your seeds planted, to cover them with just vermiculite, just a quarter inch or whatever it says, an eighth inch. It tends to keep the disease, especially the fungus that causes damping off, at a minimum. So uh, use a little bit. Use this for the main part for the plants to grow in, and then vermiculite is another sterile type uh, seed starting compound. And I've used that, and I haven't had any damping off for years. So I usually use the seed starting compound pre-moistened.
hmm
It doesn't. You don't want. You want it just to be damp. You don't want it, if
Not
you
dripping
take it,
wet.
bring it.
Yeah.
No, if it's dripping, you've got it too wet.
Yes.
And then pack it, put it in your thing so that there's no air pockets, and tap it a couple times, and it's gonna be good. And then you're gonna want to also, once you get those seeds planted and everything, like I say, you can plant them a whole packet in a plant like this, and if you use the seed starting, you're going to be able to dislodge those roots out of that without damaging. Or you can take a little bit more time and put them in these little individual pots, or even better, I've got these big trays.
Oh, and that is
And
that self-watering?
this is a heating pad.
Oh, very nice. John, see, John is our
So
gadget guy. Anytime we want to see garden products or garden tools at work, John's the guy to go to because he's got everything.
So you can see this has got a heating pad in it, and it's going to take and heat you plug it in, and it's going to heat the soil so it's 70 degrees. And it Seeds start so much better when you have them at 70 degrees. Then you would put these trays in your tray here, and then cover it with this clear thing. So you're almost creating like a terrarium.
Mm-hmm. Sort of like a
And
personal greenhouse for your starts.
a little until they germinate. As soon as they germinate, you don't want the plants to touch this, because that can cause some disease also. So, but those are they're you don't need many, because you could put a couple thousand plants in one tray,
Mm-hmm.
if you concentrate them enough. So
John, we've got
but
about
that
2
heating
minutes left. I wanted to ask
okay,
you the importance of reading the seed packet. We don't have a lot of time, but
yes,
people often
yes.
overlook that. So, in a minute or so,
The,
talk a little bit about that.
the seed packet have all kinds of information on here, and depending on the company, you're going to have some that have the in it highlighted. They're going to talk about um, things like the type of plant. Is it an annual? The planting depth is extremely important, and germination time. You may think, oh, they're not coming up, but you only waited a week, and if you look and read the packet, it says germination rate 14 days. You shouldn't have anything up for probably 14 days. So another thing is the height. Am I planting something that I want for in the front and it's too tall? May as well not plant it, because I'm not going to use it. Is it direct sun? Does it need full sun or part sun? So read this. They put this on here so that you have success with your seeds, so that you come back and buy their seed packet again next year.
Okay.
Older seeds, just because you have older seeds doesn't mean that there is online a seed longevity chart, and like tomato seeds are good for up to 7 to 10 years. I've got some from 2011 that I'm still using. So that's
Wow.
10 years, and I'm still getting a fairly decent germination rate on those. Not 100% by any means, but
Okay.
so it's
Well,
that
we're
time of the
we're gonna
year,
have to check
and
back in with you, John, once we starting our seeds, because we're coming up on that time.
yes,
So we'll join back in with you once you get things planted and see how things are going. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's always informative when you stop by. Appreciate it. And thank you so
you
much
bet.
for watching. We've had a great show. We've learned a lot today, and we will see you next time. But don't forget, if you would like to drop us a line, you can send an email to yourgarden@gmail.com, or you can look us up on Facebook. Just search for Mid-American Gardener. I'm Tanisha Spain, and we'll see you next time. Good night.